I'm the only lone ranger. Nobody else is doing anything about this is an argument that we hear. We heard it very loudly in Australia last year as they were pushing their legislation, and it's fundamentally incorrect. It is fundamentally incorrect. There are many countries, and this study really proves and shows to extraordinary detail the kind of legislation that is being pursued, is being adopted and implemented in different countries. What is of note is that not all of this legislation is going to be identical. This is not about cut and paste cookie cutter approach. It means each country needs to adopt the climate legislation that is appropriate for its national reality, because the climate legislation needs to be out of its own national interest. It needs to maximize the potential and the opportunities that that country has. So each set of legislations in each country are going to be unique. Having said that, there is much that can be learned from the other countries that are already farther ahead.
And there was a lot of talk today about this initiative being complementary to the UN talks. How enthused are you, and how keen are you to see more initiatives of this sort taking place? And are you concerned that it will become some kind of competition to the framework in the agreement that you're working on?
No, quite to the contrary. I really see this as contributing in a very, very important way. I do have the conviction that a universal agreement will not be reached until and unless there is enough domestic legislation in place and being implemented. So this is absolutely the bottom-up approach that needs to be followed. And at the same time, we must understand that there has to be a global agreement so that brings in the top-down. So it is very clear that we need both bottom-up legislation as well as top-down to be able to mutually reinforce each other.
And in terms of this report, I know you haven't read all 600 pages, but which countries do you think can give us hope, can give people confidence that movement is taking place around the world?
Well, each one in its own different way. Mexico has a very, very far-reaching legislation that is very interesting, in particular for those countries that are developing countries moving into being developed countries, of which there are quite a few. So for those emerging countries and emerging economies, it's a very interesting example what Mexico is doing. At the same time that China, for example, is putting forward legislation on a region-by-region, city-by-city level that is also very interesting for the size of economy that China is. And then you take the other extreme. You have Kenya, you have El Salvador, you have much, much smaller economies that are also taking step forwards in a very different way because it's a very different national reality. So there is no one country that you can pull out and say this is the way that everybody needs to go. Each legislation, each package of legislation measures needs to be unique and attuned to the reality of that one country.
And a final question about this year. I mean, the Doha talks finished. We have the Doha Gateway. How enthused were you after that conference? It was clearly, once again, it took slightly longer to finish than perhaps it should have done. But how confident are you that you can build on the Doha Gateway?
I'm actually very, very confident, and yes, it took longer than we all expected. What is remarkable to me is that even if the conference goes beyond the limit set, the negotiators stay, the governments stay, and they work day in and day out until they can actually come to an agreement with each other. So there really is full commitment here to finding solutions. They're not easy, they're complex, they need to include everyone, and it's very, very difficult to get to this, but there is commitment to do the hard work. So I really commend every single one of the negotiators who stayed up day in, day out, night in, night out, to reach the agreement that needed to be reached in Doha, which was an important step, but only a step. There is a long path to go between here and 2015, and I do not doubt the commitment of governments to actually reach the 2015 agreement, both at the international level and particularly if it is supported by national legislation.